All right, let's go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Caitlin Barnard, Developer and Community Marketing Manager here at Kong, and I'm also joined by Kevin Chen, Developer Advocate, who's going to be our presenter for today's meetup. Today we are going to be talking about our latest Kuma 0.6 release, which I'm super excited about, as well as a little bit about the recent announcement that the project has been donated to the CNCF sandbox. We also then at the end have a couple updates from the upcoming Kong 2.1 release as well. So with that, Kevin, I'll hand it over to you to kick us off.
Awesome. Hey folks, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
All right, like Caitlin said, my name is Kevin. I'm the Developer Advocate at Kong, usually based out in San Francisco, actually in Taiwan right now. And today I'm going to cover a little about, what came out in the new release, what happened to the project when we donated to the CNCF, and I'll also leave a little time for Hisham, who is the product manager for the Kong Gateway, so he can share exciting news about, what's happening on the gateway side of things too. You can always find me on Twitter or GitHub at DevAdvocado there. So if you have any questions afterwards, you can feel free to find me via that tag. So late June, roughly like 2 weeks ago, we had really exciting news that the donation for the Kuma Mesh project was accepted into the CNCF sandbox. And from there, we are really excited to see where this takes off and where Kuma can go. As for, the community side of things, or the user, nothing will change aside from, be now a CNCF project. And Kong as a company will continue to support it as contributors of the project. And despite donating, we're still, really engaged with trying to create contributions, find new contributors, get people engaged in the community and growing the community. So, Kuma can really take off. So if anyone, wants to continue to contribute, oh wait, I can't jump the gun. Oh, we can skip to here first. There's a lot of ways to continue to participate. You can go to chat.kuma.io to join the Slack channel, where we're all there and actively engaging with the community. You can tune into bi-weekly community calls. You can sign up at kuma.io/community, or you can check out the new GitHub org. So we moved all the relevant repositories into a new GitHub org, Kuma HQ. So you can find everything there, including the website, repository, the demo repository, and the GUI as well. So everything's there, and we're really excited to see where this takes off. So that's kind of the brief update on CNCF side of things and donation. If you guys have any more questions regarding that, you can find us at the Slack channel, and we'll answer it there. Or we can open up the floor at the end of this this call so people can ask questions as well. Awesome. So now we covered the bare necessities of the donation. I want to move on to kind of what's the bread and butter of this. The meat of this the talk is the 0.6 release, which coincided very coincidentally with the donation. So we were really happy we could announce both at the same time. But I was afraid that because of the donation, a lot of the kind of cool features, especially the distributed deployment of Kuma, would be overshadowed. So today I'm going to give you a quick overview of what distributed deployment looks like versus the original flat mode, how to get up and running really quickly. So you can get a more hands-on experience of what came out in the new release. So this is what we call, this was the original deployment mode, what we used to call, now we call the flat mode, right? And that's me trying to play with word art again. So it's really the simplest form of deploying Kuma and the default one. It's a lot, if people have played with Kuma before, it's what they're familiar with. And that's with, when we deploy Kuma, we have one control plane. And that one deployment control plane can be squared horizontally, and all the data planes will connect to that one single control plane. And that's where you would apply the policies, and we use XCS APIs to configure all the Envoy proxies to follow those, to enforce those policies. But there are some kind of, restrictions with that. Not to say that you can't use flat mode for multi-cluster or hybrid deployments. You totally could, but there was a lot of networking requirements that you had to satisfy in order for that to be possible. And the reality is, especially for larger organizations, you can't always hit those network requirements. And so flat mode is great if you have one cluster, or everything is one Kubernetes cluster or one VPC. But if you want to do more, it becomes just increasingly hard to deploy in a flat mode situation for Kuma in a flat mode for that. So we essentially had to come up with something that satisfied and supported multi-cluster or hybrid deployments a little better. And that's where 0.6 really shined, is this new, what we call distributive mode. Distributive mode, oh, there you go, distributed, right? I'm trying to drag it. So what distributive mode is, it introduces a new character and what I call the global CP. This is starring Pitbull there. So global CP is a new kind of, it's not like a brand new idea, right? It kind of acts as that original control plane you saw in the flat mode, but it becomes this new kind of leader within, it becomes the new kind of, I guess the main source of truth if you're deploying in a multi-cluster mode. And that because there now becomes multiple control planes, right? With the global control plane, listening to all the kind of policies that you want to enforce, now we have individual remote control planes in each of the clusters or the zones that you may deploy. So to break down this chart a little more, I should have enlarged this. My apologies there. This is what distributed mode would look like. And distributed mode allows support for multi-mesh a lot better, and also it supports hybrid deployments a lot better. All right. So what changed in this? We see a lot of new components as well, aside from just the global CP. So first, to cover the global CP, the global control plane is what will be used to configure all the global policies, right, that you want to apply to all the data plane proxies across all the meshes. The data plane proxies will not connect directly, right? So you can see here, the data plane proxies will never connect directly to the global control plane. Instead, the global control plane will only connect to all the remote control planes in each of the zones. This way, it'll be the single source of truth, and then you can scale this control plane horizontally if need be. All right. Oh, I keep scrolling by. So next, we have the remote control planes. So you would have as many remote control planes as the number of underlying Kubernetes clusters or VM zones that you would have Kuma Mesh running in. And then these remote control planes would accept connections from the data planes, and then it would configure those Envoy proxies with the XDS API. So basically, there's just this extra chain of command. So Kuma, the global control plane, has a source of truth and will tell all the individual control planes what is the policies you want to enforce. And then we have a few more things at the bottom here, or even within the control plane, right? So now Kuma, for easier service connectivity, it ships with an out-of-box DNS server. So every control plane, every remote control plane, that will be used to resolve service addresses when establishing any service-to-service communication. This way, you don't have to worry about that, and it'll come out of the box. And then lastly, something new about the kind of distributed deployment is the Ingress data planes. So now Kuma also ships out of the box with Ingress data plane mode. And this way it'll be used to enable traffic to enter a zone from another zone. Each zone must have an Ingress data plane deployed, and we'll see that later when I go through the demo. So any questions? I don't see any. Let me check. Cool. Oh, there's a comment about bear. All right, awesome. So nothing so far. We can always circle back if you have any questions about what distributed deployment looks like. But I'm a show not tell kind of guy. So we have a demo built out. It's readily available. I'll just change to it. So if you're to go to Kuma demo, which is now in the awesome Kuma HQ org, we actually have a new branch called multi-cluster that we're working on. there we will showcase how to deploy in both universal and Kubernetes and hybrid. Right now it's not merged to master yet. I'll get that in hopefully by the end of the week so everyone can try it out, but you can find everything in this one branch so far. And today I'm going to be walking through exactly how to run Kuma in a distributed mode on universal. So we built out, or Jacob very kindly built out a lot of these scripts. He's awesome. So what we have here is essentially a 2-cluster deployment. And you see we have cluster 1, cluster 2. Each of them will have their own services, own Ingress data plane as required, and each of their own control planes. And after we have those 2 clusters up and running, we'll eventually deploy a global control plane to connect to those remote control planes and configure them. And you'll see how that works in action. So first things first, let me blow this up a little more so everyone can see clearly. Awesome. So let's go to cluster 1 and see what we have here. Oh, before we do that, I actually want to check a few things. I have Kuma installed. You can download it at kuma.io. And to check what version I have, I'm going to use Kuma CTO version to see, okay, I have 0.6, the latest one. You don't want to be trying this with anything older than 0.6 because it won't work because it's part of the new release. So if you have Kuma downloaded previously, make sure you download the new version and update the path. So Kuma CTO you're using the 0.6 version. Awesome. And before I start with that, I also want to check the Kuma CTL config. So we included a configuration file for Kuma CTL that points to the right control planes when we're setting things up. And we also have a script included, so you can basically move this Kuma CTL config file into the right place. So you'll see there. So let's just run that real quick. There you go. And if I do Kuma CTL config view, I think, yep, we'll see that that is the configuration that we're expecting, right? So we're going to have 2 local clusters. We're going to have eventually a global control plane as seen here. And then we have all the addresses for them. All right, so current context, we're in global. Awesome. So what do we have next? So we have our Kuma setup. We have Kuma CTL setup and all the configurations in an appropriate place. Next, we are going to start running our cluster. So we are in universal. Let's go into cluster 1. And here you'll see a few more scripts and a few more YAML files for configuring Kuma. So we have the runs. So we're going to be running a few of these scripts, which will simplify things. But you can always go into this repository, see exactly what these scripts are doing. I can just show one, for example. So if I do the run CP one, which is the first one we're doing, it's simply just using the Kuma CP command, which should be in your path as well when you install Kuma. And just using the run command with additional configurations of Kuma cp.yaml. And we can also take a look at that, but I won't dig too deep into this. All this like kind of configuration stuff you can find on the documentation itself. All right, so the first thing is we're going to have to run those remote control planes because every single cluster will have to, or zone, will need its own control plane. These will be the remote control planes. And I believe, as you can see here, we actually give it the mode remote, right? So you can configure these clusters as remote. So Kuma knows that these will not be any global CPs. So I'll go ahead and run cp.script. There you go. We have everything up and running. All right, awesome. You see, we can see that Kuma is now running in mode remote and all the necessary information. Okay, so the only caveat of this demo, and I apologize, is we're going to be splitting the terminal screen a lot. So bear with me here. All right, because everything. So we have the control plane up and running. Now we want to have the ingress up and running as well, right? Because I remember I mentioned in that diagram, if I go back, every single cluster will need that ingress. So services can go inbound and outbound of the cluster. So to do that, we have an ingress there. So if I go ahead and, I promise I won't do this for all the scripts, but at first we're going to configure to switch the control plane, which we just deployed. And then we're going to apply the ingress YAML, generate a token for it, and then run the data plane, right, as an ingress data plane. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, run ingress. There we go. And you'll see that in the terminal window, we see that, there you go, we created Ingress token, cluster 1 Ingress token for this. And this one, okay. So we know it's up and running and working. Cool. So next, what we're going to do is run the gateway data plane. So this is when I am going to stop showing every single script file because it's going to take up too much time. I want Hisham to show us what's going on the Kong side. So I am just going to start running these scripts, but know that you can always find these files available on GitHub, and we'll continue to work on improving them and moving them to master because I don't want them to sit on a separate branch. It makes it a little harder to find, right? So, okay, so now we have, all the necessary components. We have the remote control plane up here, up and running. Zoom in a little. We have the Ingress data plane running, and we have the data plane running, right? The service data plane running. So now we need the service. So to do that, we have a very simple service, which, it's not the full Kuma demo marketplace yet, but it works for now to showcase the distributed deployment mode. So I will eventually migrate the demo to use a more robust demo application, so it mimics like real life deployments. So let me start the run. What is it? The service backend. Yeah, there we go. Backend. There we go. Okay. Oh wait, no. Service backend. DP first. Sorry. Data plane. Backend DP. There you go. There you go. And then I can start. So okay. There we go. It adds that, and then now I can run the actual service itself. Service backend. There you go. Okay, so it only took 5 terminal windows, and we're only on cluster number 1. So we got a few more to do, but I'm gonna open a new window so it's not just divided up into a billion here later. So just to open one more tiny one, just to let's check if the service is up and running. So to do so, we have a little request through gateway script that basically just checks if the service is up and running. You'll see that it is indeed. I'll stop it now, but it's saying that we're hitting. It tells us the cluster, the version of the application, and the service itself we call backend. So we know that the service is indeed up and running on cluster 1. Okay, so let's leave this. I'm just opening a new tab here and blowing this up. We have cluster 1 up and running. We now need a second cluster to showcase the distributed deployment, right? So if we were to go back a full directory and go to cluster 2, you'll see that it's a lot of the same script, right? We're running the control plane, the Ingress, the data plane next to the service, and then the service itself. So it's very familiar. And then eventually we'll showcase, how to deploy one in Kubernetes and one in Vagrant, how to connect those two. But the idea is the same. You always just want to have these same components, the remote control plane, the Ingress, and the data planes for your service all in the same cluster, and you can connect them very seamlessly. So first things first, we run the control plane, and you'll see now we have control plane. It's also a remote control plane, but somewhere we call it like cluster 2, right? So later on, the global control plane knows the difference. Okay, so time to split some screens. With the up and running, we run the Ingress. I sound like I'm repeating myself, but it really is that simple, right? It's just a few steps for each, and then you're up and running in distributed mode. Once we have the Ingress up and running, we have the data plane. So let's run, what is it, backend DP 02, yeah. We have 03 and 02. So this cluster will have 2 services, actually, not just one. Okay, so the data plane is running. Now we can run the service 2, and then we can run the backend data plane for 3. Let's see, how should I split the screen? I will go horizontally now. This is a mess, and I apologize. I wish my screen was far larger than this, but this will suffice. Okay, so now we have run service backend 2. So we deployed in this screen right here, this terminal window, we deployed the backend data plane, right? And now we deploy the service. So backend 02. That's up and running. And now we just do the same thing for 3. So we deploy the data plane. Where does it run? Backend DP2. Oh, wait, no, we did 2. So 3. So, okay, data plane 3. Everything's good. No error logs from the control plane. And then now, last but not least, we're almost done here. Stay with me here. Run backend service, right? Service backend. I need to change the names of these scripts because I keep forgetting it. 03. Okay, no error message. Okay, cool. So now we have 2 clusters up and running, 2 remote control planes, right? 2 ingresses, many data planes for all the services we have. But the question then is, how do we, connect those 2 remote control planes? And that's a matter of going back to that, that global control plane and having that connect to all the remote control planes. And that global control plane will only connect to the remote control planes, right? They won't connect to all the data planes we already deployed. So now that we are ready with the 2 clusters, let's go back to the universal directory, and you'll see that we have a global ready right there. So here we have, the run CP again, right? And this time the run CP is slightly different. If we look at the Kuma CP YAML, which is a configuration file, you'll see that it no longer configures it as remote. Instead, here in the cluster configuration mode, we have a mode as global, telling that Kuma, hey, you're going to be the leader in this distributed mode, and you're going to listen to these remote addresses. Right? So these are the remote addresses of those individual remote control planes, and we also have to specify the ingress itself. So when you deploy, the really only caveat that you have to pay attention is these kind of cluster configurations to make sure that you are indeed pointing to the right remote control planes and the right ingress, providing the right address to those. With that, I really see little to very little, I want to say, I fingers crossed, very little kind of friction for you to deploy in distributed mode. And if you do, of course, open up an issue, and that's where we can improve on docs, or you can open up a PR in the Kuma website, contribute, because we have t-shirts for our contributors. Okay, so I talked about this is the new Kuma control plane configuration for global. What do we do with it, right? We have the CP YAML. We're going to run the Kuma script, the run CP script, and you'll see that's the same thing, right? We're just using the Kuma CP binary that you download on Kuma IO, and then you do the run command with the configuration that in this YAML. So let's go ahead and do that. Run CP. Awesome. Looks good. No issues. Discovery response. Awesome. So if that doesn't give you any hiccups, right? Now we have to do a quick switch for the Kuma CTL. So earlier when we ran a script, I think Kuma CTL is right now pointed at the wrong control plane. Right? It's pointed at one of the remote control planes, and we can check that by doing the config view. Right? So this is configuration, all the contexts is, and then on the bottom, you'll see the current context. It's pointing to cluster number 2. But once we have the global control plane deployed, that is where we want to configure everything. So you will have to basically reconfigure your Kuma CTL, which is very simple. It's just doing like Kuma CTL config set, or we can use a script like the switch, this one, right? And you'll see that it's literally just Kuma CTL config control planes and switching to the name of the control plane context, right? And here we're going to switch it back to global. So we're going to do switch Kuma CTL. Awesome. So control plane is up and running. All 3 control planes, right? One remote, one global, 2 remotes, and we have Kuma CTL. Let's wrap it up real quick, right? How do we know everything is up and running? Well, the single control plane, right, this global control plane, should be able to see everything across all your clusters, right, underneath both remote control points. And we can do that by just using the Kuma CTL command, right? And first is, let's just inspect the data planes, right? We deployed 3 services and 3 data planes alongside them. We do still have some additional ones, such as the gateway data plane, which will allow us to access one of our services externally, and the Ingress data planes for each cluster. So I expect, right, we have 3 services data planes, 2 Ingress, that's 5, and then we have the last data plane Ingress. So we should have 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes. So we know everything's up and running. And let me try to scale this a little better. We can just inspect it a little wide, but let's just get data planes. A little less information, but that's fine. The age, ooh, I might have to go check on that. It is definitely not 292 years old. But as you can see here on the name, we have the 2 clusters, cluster 1 and cluster 2, and both of them have, cluster 1 has Ingress, which is necessary, the gateway, which is what will allow us to connect to that cluster 1 service earlier, and the backend data plane, which sits alongside the service. Here we have the Ingress, which is necessary once again for cluster 2, right? Different clusters, different Ingresses, and then the 2 backend data planes along the 2 services. So you can see that it's for service, backend version 2, and backend version 1. Okay, with that, I want to wrap up my demo so I leave adequate time for Hisham, because while the mesh is very important, you still need a gateway. So let's see what he has ready for us in the next release. So demo time is done. So yeah, check out Distributive Mode for Kuma. It's in the latest release now. And without further ado, let's welcome Hisham. Hisham, are you ready?
Yes, thanks, Kevin. But I think we have I have some questions in the chat, which you might want to cover.
Let's see. We have Rob on with, is this related to federated APIs, objects? Does Kuma do the same as solo glue? Is Sto involved? Is there a single point of failure in the control plane? So Rob has quite a few questions. So the first one, I'm not quite sure what you're referring to, and I think we do have a few. Let's see. Oh, all the engineers have left me here. So okay, there might be a few questions I can't answer. And I'll have to get back to you, or find me on the Slack channel, and there's a few things I do have to ask the engineers. And I am ashamed to say that I do not know everything. Well, I guess no one knows everything, but is Istio involved? No. So what is similar between Istio and Kuma is while we use the same Envoy proxies as the data planes, aside from that, nothing is involved, right? We are a completely different project. Different kind of mesh with different focus in mind. We strive for simplicity and capability to deploy in very universal situations. So that's kind of the root of Kuma. And does Kuma do the same as solo glue? I've never played around with it, so I don't quite know. So yeah.
Glue is Solo's API gateway.
Okay, yeah. They have a mesh too, right? If I'm not mistaken. Nothing beats Google. I think they don't. I think they have a mesh hub, yeah, but they don't have an actual mesh service. But yeah, okay, so Solo's glue would be a competitor to the Kong gateway and not Kuma, right? Kuma is a mesh and not a gateway. It would be complementary, I would say. Yeah, thanks, Helen, for this the link. And what's the difference between the Ingress data planes and the gateway data planes? So the Ingress data planes is for the clusters to communicate to each other, and the gateway is just to expose a service like you would do with a Kong gateway for your service in a cluster, right? It acts like kind of like the load, like external load balancer for the service. So while you don't necessarily need a gateway data plane for your clusters, you will always need an Ingress data plane, or else the clusters cannot communicate to each other, since they use that Ingress data plane specifically. Kuma would be a competitor to Istio service mesh. Well, Istio, yeah, Istio's, yeah, that would be the best way to put it. And check out both. Give us a shot, at least, All right, is there any other questions? Yeah, thanks, Dylan. I know I'm just talking to myself. This sounds weird. It's like one of those like Twitch live streams. So I'm going to stop and leave it to Hisham now.
Don't worry, we're
Hisham?
You're not talking to yourself.
Right, thanks. All right, I will stop sharing screen. Do you want?
Yeah, I did not prepare slides yet, but I just wanted to give Kong Gateway 2.1 a shout out because we have just released release candidate 1 last week, which means that save from like if any like last minute showstoppers, which we haven't had any so far, our goal is to release Kong Gateway 2.1 final this Thursday on the 16th. So it's just around the corner, and essentially you can already play with it because the RC1 is out, and this is what we expect the GA to be. And we will have probably in one of our next meetups, we're gonna have a deep dive session on all of the new stuff that's coming in Kong 2.1. But I just wanted to briefly give you like a high level list of the things that are coming, just to get you folks excited and like give RC1 a try, give us feedback. So, and of course the GA as well. So some of the things that are coming. First one that I'm super excited about is the asynchronous updates for load balancer data. This is something that we have been like slowly like chipping away for a long time over at Kong, which is a common source of performance instability is like having latency spikes when your application needs to reconfigure itself, right? It's like working at peak performance, and then it needs to do something else on the side because the configuration has changed. Then like it needs to, hiccup, do that, and keep going. So in past releases of Kong, we have fixed that for when you update your route configuration or your services configuration, so that this happens asynchronously, essentially like in the background. And for Kong 2.1, we're essentially like completing this whole process by doing it for the load balancer info itself. So now everything, so you can still configure, of course, like Kong is generally very like unopinionated about things and have lots of config switches. So you can choose to have it running like in the classic like strict mode, or you can do things, everything asynchronously. So in practice, it becomes eventually consistent, but you get much like more consistent, like reliable P99 performance to get rid of those spikes. So this is something pretty major that's coming for Kong 2.1. And yeah, apart from that, we also have new plugins for gRPC, gRPC Web, gRPC Gateway, other plugin improvements all around. We had improvements like new features in the Zipkin plugin, the rate limiting plugin, including like community contributions that went into the new version of the plugin. Another plugin that saw like lots of community contributions, adding new features with OAuth 2 as well. We have like new features in AWS Lambda, Prometheus, serverless, LDAP, like consistent header identification and all of the authentication plugins. So there's like tons of new stuff coming in, like essentially like all of the new stuff that we've been working on since we released Kong 2.0 at the beginning of the year. So we've been consistently releasing patch releases for the 2.0 series. So like all of the bug fixes are already out for 2.0 to 2.01, 2.02, 3, 4, 5. So now that we're releasing 2.10, like all of these features that we've been cooking for a long time are going to be out and stable. And let's see what else. Now, if you run Postgres, you can configure read-only replica and have all the reads go into the replica. Also, we have now one like very like low-level change was that is an important improvement is something called like the dynamic upstream keep alive pools, which is like sounds super technical, but it essentially like circumvents a limitation that Nginx has. So we had to like go super deep and patch it ourselves so that the pools of socket keep alives, like so for reusing the connections, would respect your TLS configuration. So like so it's essentially like pooling by certificates and SNIs and all of that correctly. So this will essentially we have to go to the deep end and like essentially fix this ourselves, and so that we can have the correct behavior in our in our backend server in Kong. And let's see what else. Well, lots of improvements and features for hybrid mode as well, and declarative config. So PKI support in hybrid mode, TLS, and control for certificate expiry and all of that for the communication. If you're running hybrid, which is a new deployment model that we had since Kong 2.0, that was which means you can have the control plane node and the data plane node, where it's two different Kong instances. The control plane node will have a database attached to it and admin API port for controlling your data, right? Your configuration, and that will connect to data plane nodes, which are DB-less instances of Kong. So those don't need a database anymore, and so we've made improvements to the communication between those two. And let's see what else. Well, some additional bug fixes, additions to the plugin development kit, like lots and lots of stuff. It's going to be a huge release. It's, as I said, is essentially with the release candidate is essentially already out. If you want to play with it, will be officially released and announced later this week. And yeah, and we're going to like do demos and play around in upcoming meetups. But yeah, very much looking forward to hear everyone's feedback on it, because it's something we've been working on for a long time, and we're excited to have it out. Let's see in the chat if there are any questions. Yeah, okay, now it's my turn to play the Twitch streamer and read our viewers' questions. Yeah, so I have some friends that'll let me know about the gRPC plugins. I believe that's the only thing that was preventing him from using it. I think we'll be excited. Yes, and so we are. We are very excited about those. We have two plugins that they're in, like the gRPC Web, which is for the gRPC Web protocol, which is used mostly by like browser clients and such things. And also the gRPC Gateway, which allows for upstream gRPC service, like through a plain HTTP request. Essentially, it does like a one-way translation between gRPC and like REST like HTTP. So yeah, we of course once we release the final, the GA on Thursday, then like the new version of the documentation website with all of the 2.1 stuff will be out. Right now, it's in our documentation repo, which is also in the open on GitHub. But yeah, I will be pushing the blog post with the announcement and all of that. It's going to have links to all of the appropriate places with the documentation for the specific features and all and whatnot.
That sounds awesome. Yeah. And like you said, let's see if we can schedule a demo for the next meetup.
For sure.
Yeah, so every folks can see live, like, what's coming. I know it's not ideal because the release comes out like next week. And the next meetup is, I know, like a month from now, but we'll see if there's any opportunity to kind of demo it between then. We can definitely, if folks are interested, we can put something on. Just let us know. Awesome. All right, let me wrap this up then. Thank you, Hisham. And thanks, folks, for joining as well. You can definitely, we want to stay in touch. There's different channels for different products. So for the Kong side, you can go to our discourse page at discuss.konghq.com. Here, like when we do the Kong release, Hisham will definitely post there usually. And if you have any questions that run into when you try out the RC or when it is released, you can also post questions there for Kong. For the Kuma side, you can check out kuma.io/community. Here you can sign up for the community call or the Slack channel, so you can stay engaged with what we're building. And we'd love for you to join us and contribute and try to move Kuma from through the CNCF stages, so we can become a mature and graduated product sooner rather than later. The next call will be August 11th. We'd love to see you there as well. And thanks, folks. I really appreciate it. All right, later.
Thank you.